Joined by Utah insider Josh Newman, who joins us here on the Dish Pros hotline. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing well, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Let's start with the news of the day. Yesterday, we got the alert about noontime of what the report was and that Morgan Scalley would be keeping his job. You were on the call. I was on the call yesterday. We listened to it all. What was your takeaway from the report to the letter to what you heard on the conference call yesterday?
I think the one thing that really stands out to me big time is just the fact that Morgan Scalley was very contrite, very apologetic. As we all know, the people who were on the call, as we know, he had some trouble kind of keeping it together at some points, right? He got very emotional. So I think that was important to see that he is sorry. He did make a mistake, and he's trying to move forward now. As for the report, I don't think anybody thought that this was a situation where this had been going on for a number of years. Not that there were a lot of cases. The report was, parts positive, parts negative, but this was not something that was going on for years and years. As for the punishment, to me, that was the news. We had all assumed that he was the head coach in waiting. That was not in writing. That was a verbal agreement that Morgan Scalley was the head coach in waiting if and when Kyle decides to retire. He was bumped up to $1.1 million. That salary is now cut in half, and he's no longer the head coach in waiting. So a lot to process yesterday. I don't think all of it was unexpected, but still, to have some kind of finality, to have the result out there. The whole thing was pretty jarring yesterday, I'll say that.
It was, and the emotion of Morgan Scalley's voice was probably as jarring as anything. We carried the press conference yesterday and played some audio. I knew there would be a financial penalty and component. I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised because somebody asked me yesterday, were you surprised how transparent they were with everything? And I said, in a normal setting, yeah, maybe so. But where we are today, Josh, with society, with culture, with a lot of things that are going on, I think it was the wise move, and I think it was the smart move to be as transparent with the penalties, what was there, all those things. That way, as I told somebody last night, that way people know that Utah was serious about it. Clemson, when they penalized their assistant coach a month ago for using a similar slur, basically Dabo said it was handled in-house, and that was that. I think Mark Harlan wanted to be as transparent as possible so people knew how serious they were with the punishment.
I think that's well said. I do think they did a good job of being transparent. Mark Harlan was, genuinely displeased on that call. You could hear it in his voice. This was obviously not a good situation. It's an embarrassment for him and his athletic department that this even went on, and the fact that this went on for the investigation took about 3 weeks before we got any news. And in terms of transparency, I like the decision of Harlan and Kyle Whittingham to allow Morgan Scalley to get on the call, force him to answer questions, and let him speak for himself. We all had questions for Morgan and about the situation. And look, I don't want those answers from Mark Harlan or Kyle Whittingham. I want those answers from Morgan Scalley. So good on Utah for allowing Morgan to speak for himself.
Josh Newman, our guest from the Salt Lake Tribune, University of Utah beat writer and insider. I think the football component part of this moving forward is the easier of the two, Josh. I think those kids, most spoke for him, I'm guessing, especially this current crop. It will be tough, I'm sure, initially, not being on a Zoom call, to be in front of that room for the first time, talking to those kids face-to-face. But I think the football part of it can be fixed pretty quickly. The recruiting part's going to be the interesting part here. And, because I'm sure in 3.5 weeks, the negative recruiting has already begun, and he's one of the ace recruiters on the staff. So I think that the second prong of it's a little bit more difficult than the first prong. What about you?
I would agree with you. And I spent a lot of time just throughout the month of June, once this happened, just kind of processing everything and thinking about hypotheticals and scenarios and what's going to take place. And I really do come back to, how is Morgan Scalley supposed to sit in a family's living room, especially an African-American recruit's living room, and tell that kid's parents that he's going to take care of their son after what came out and after what's gone on. And I say that thinking in the short term, right? Who knows what the long term brings in terms of this whole situation? 4 years, 5 years down the road, maybe things soften, maybe things get better. He can rebuild his reputation over time. But at least for right now, I just don't see how he sits in someone's living room and makes promises to parents. That part is going to be very hard. And as you said, he's an ace recruiter. So this is a problem for Kyle Whittingham if one of, if not his top recruiter can't effectively recruit. I don't know what the answer is for that.
I don't know that anybody does. I think that's where you have to have some character witnesses that will stand up for you, that you can call on to say, yeah, he took good care of me. Hey, if you have any questions about this, here's a couple of phone numbers of parents who I took care of their kids. If you have any questions, you could talk to them if you would like to. I don't know that fixes it, but you might need a little help in the short term because there will be people that have questions.
No, and it's such a tough situation, and you go back and forth, you're trying to decide, and he's been an effective recruiter in not only an effective recruiter, but effective in very important strongholds, right? Morgan has gone into Texas and gotten kids from that talent-rich state, and he's gone into California, another state where there's talent all over the place. So, yeah, I mean, tough sledding, and it's going to be interesting because as time has gone on here, Utah has gotten better and better and better on the recruiting trail. This last recruiting cycle, they had a top 5 class in the Pac-12. I think they were 29th or 30th nationally. So the trajectory there has been clearly upwards. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that moving forward.
All right, on to the next hurdle that we deal with in 2020, football itself. 63 days from today, Josh, you and I are supposed to be on the 6th floor of Rice-Eccles Stadium getting ready for the 101st meeting between Utah and BYU. Do you feel good about us being at Rice-Eccles Stadium in 63 days?
What day is it? I feel, I felt better about it a week ago. 2 weeks ago, cases are spiking. You see other Pac-12 areas like Arizona spiking and California's backing things up. My feeling today, as we head towards the noon hour, I wasn't feeling great about it, being there on time. But we saw this morning that Rio Tinto Stadium is going to host a soccer game with fans in the building at 25% capacity. And they're working with state and local officials to make sure that everything's kosher and that's okay. Rio Tinto Stadium is in the same county as Rice-Eccles Stadium. If Rio Tinto can get permission to host at 25% capacity, can Rice-Eccles get the same type of permission come September 3rd to host? One of many questions I have right now. But to your main point, do I feel good about it starting on time? I don't, just because things are spiking and, we're getting to the point where you really have to make some firm, tangible decisions. I'm kind of coming back to the spring idea, the January, February, maybe winter, spring idea. That seems to be picking up a little more steam. But just like anything else, if you start talking about winter or spring, that has a million other questions and problems with it. So, I'm sure if you ask me tomorrow, I'm going to have a different stance. I mean, that's how, that's really how things have gone here for the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I was going to get to that story a little bit later in the show, but the Real Monarchs are supposed to play the San Diego Loyal SC on July 11th. We're not talking about like August 11th, July 11th. That's in 9 days at Rio Tinto with up to 5,300 fans in the stands. So that will be interesting. That story came out this morning. So we'll see how that goes. I wasn't even talking about fans in the stands, though, Josh. I was just strictly talking about football because I've ridden the roller coaster. I've been pretty firm, and I'll stay pretty firm that we'll have football. But fans, I've gone from nope to maybe right. 50% to maybe 25 to we may be playing in front of an empty stadium, and it might just be you and me and a handful of media types at the game.
But look, just in terms of football. And I have not wavered on this. I do think at some point in the 2020-21 academic year, whether it's fall, winter, spring, there will be football. If there is not football, and this isn't just Utah, this goes for any Power 5 school that counts on football. If there is no football, the economics of your athletic department just collapse. You cannot function unless you play football. So Utah and the Pac-12 and the rest of the Power 5, they are going to go through every last possibility, every last hypothetical what if. They are going to do everything within their power to get a football season played, because if they don't get a football season played, the economic ramifications are going to be very severe.
Boise State eliminated baseball, swimming, and diving today, and we haven't even not played football yet.
Yeah,
$3 million savings to eliminate baseball, men's and women's swimming and diving, and and this is with the expectation that football will still be played, and they're already eliminating sports.
No, it's crazy, and it's happening at you're seeing that at schools across the country, not so much at the Power 5 level, but places in the American, and as you just said, Boise State. The Boise State thing is really a shame, because I do know that Boise State baseball had been dropped like 40 years ago, and they finally brought back Boise State baseball. We saw the spring season get pretty much wiped out because of COVID, and now Boise State baseball is gone again. So some very hard decisions being made across the country in athletic departments. Hypotheticals all over the place. You're looking at your budget, you're looking at your bottom line, you're looking at what you can afford, and those things are happening in Utah. And thankfully for Mark Harlan and his athletic department, as far as we know, they have not had to make any of those really dire, hard decisions just yet.
Before I let you go, let's talk some actual football. Assuming that we get a camp and that they'll get ready for that season opener in 63 days. If we're talking about football-related storylines that you're interested in, quarterback's too easy, so don't give me quarterback, because that's always the big storyline. Aside from the quarterback, give me a player or a storyline that you're interested in once camp begins and into the season.
I'm looking forward to seeing who kind of steps up in the wide receiver core. Not necessarily a young group, but certainly an inexperienced group. Guys like Solomon Ennis have to step forward, big downfield threat who would seem to have the tools but just hasn't had the reps to really show what he can do. To that end, Britton Covey is back. Obviously a huge piece of the puzzle in terms of receiving, but also on special teams, returning punts, things like that. On the defensive side of the ball, you lose 9 starters. The secondary was decimated by graduation and draft defections. Clark Phillips, right, comes here with a lot of hype, highest rated recruit in the history of the program. Would seem to be at this point would still seem to be the odds-on favorite to start the opener either at nickel or at true corner. So a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience at many positions across the field, but I do think it's good that, one, that Morgan Scalley is back, and 2, he's back in time before summer access begins, when coaches can be involved come late July. So despite the inexperience, despite the youth, you would still believe that they'll be able to get these kids in line, in shape to play the opener on September 3rd.
How many Nathan's hot dogs will you be eating on Saturday in honor of the 4th of July and Joey Chestnut?
I do miss the East Coast sometimes, Bill, right? I do miss the beach. And right before we moved out here, we did take a trip out to Coney Island, and I did have a Nathan's hot dog right before we moved out here. But you're making me homesick right now.
Well, you can buy them at the grocery store here. You can get the Hebrew National. I know. It's packaged. It's not the same as when they're being cooked in the store. Somebody's yelling what toppings you want on them. I get it, but you can still get the Nathan's famous dogs. You can, and I am looking forward to getting out in Sugar House a little bit and seeing some more things and trying some more restaurants. So, I hope everybody out there does have a happy 4th. Just pretend that area of Sugar House is the boardwalk, and you're walking down there and have your hot dog, and it's the boardwalk. I know it ain't Coney Island, but you can pretend. If you can provide a beach for me, that would make it easier. You can call me with that if you want. Don't go to the Great Salt Lake. Let me just tell you now. I don't know if you've gone out there yet. This time of year is the worst. It stinks. It's hot. There's bugs. don't go out and think there's a beach at the Great Salt Lake.
No, we're going to settle for a hike or two this weekend.
That'll be
I think
good.
That'll do it.
That'll be good. Hey, thanks for coming on. I hope to see you soon.
I appreciate it, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.